Good afternoon and welcome to Making Security Integral for Your Business with BT Security. I'm Louis Newman, one of our cybersecurity sales specialists, and very lucky today to be joined by Steve Benton. Steve, I'll let you introduce yourself and tell the people a little bit about what we do.
Thanks very much, Louis, and thank you to everyone that has tuned in and is watching. I'm Steve Benton. I'm Deputy Chief Security Officer for BT. I also run cyber and physical operations globally that protects BT and our customers. And I also look after the annual investment programme where we're developing the new stuff that continues to help us keep pace with the security threats as they evolve, as they constantly do, Louis.
Exactly, and it's very clear that from what you've said that we're trying to make security integral to our business.
Yes.
I suppose the first thing that I would ask you really is how have you seen the motivations for cyber attacks changing?
Well, the thing that you have to do when you consider this is recognise that the world is constantly changing, and there's a four-letter acronym that I have in my mind called VUCA, and recognise that the world is volatile, it's unpredictable, it's complex, and it's ambiguous. So ambiguous in the way that there may not be a single true answer and right answer for stuff, that it's complex and that it can be difficult to understand. It can be unpredictable in the ways that it will go, and there's volatility. So example graphics you see there on the slide where you're looking at Donald Trump getting into the White House and how he is as a president, and he can be a little bit volatile, a little bit challenging. We have Russia flexing their muscles around the world. We have the UK leaving the EU, and what is that going to mean? And we have tensions, indeed, between UK and Russia because of what happened in Salisbury. Now, all of these things can create a different environment as who might be paying attention to you in terms of security risk. And so what we've seen definitely a rise in some nation-state activity, possibly to demonstrate capability, to show that they're out there and could exert leverage on nations or even, in extreme cases, to destabilise them. But fundamentally, the motivation for most of cyber is money. It's monetization of whatever breach they do, whether it's in terms of taking data and selling it on, or whether it's directly using that data to play back to individuals or organizations in order to defraud them and make money from them that way. And we've certainly seen a rise in very targeted and complex scenarios around targeting high-value individuals and organizations, what we call spear phishing. Yeah. But they're not just using email, they're using vishing as well, so phoning people up as well and being very plausible and getting them to do things that they shouldn't be doing. They think they're doing the right thing and they're not. So they're just getting very, very sophisticated in how they're attacking us. Yeah.
And so you mentioned risks, you mentioned motivation there. We work for BT. Yeah. How does that affect us as a multinational corporation?
Well, gosh, it affects us a lot because we hold and we transact a lot of financial transactions. We hold a lot of customer data as well. And we provide services, some of which are critical to the UK and other parts of the world in which we operate. And we're a global carrier of telecommunications and the internet. So when we look at the cyber risk to BT, we're thinking about the different types of actor group, but we're thinking about what their motivations are, going back to your first question. Yeah. Know your adversary. Why are they interested in you? What is it do they want to do? And then how would they consider actually doing that? So we would be very careful about all our interfaces, about how they could be exercised, how they could be abused. And we work through scenarios and test those. And then we make sure that those interfaces are secure, but then we also look at the data that we're capturing and holding throughout its life cycle. Where's that data at motion or at rest? Is it secured? Is it adequately looked after? Would we know if something went wrong with it? Both in terms of a data breach, which we all hope we don't get, but what if that data was interfered with so we couldn't trust it? Well, that would be a significant challenge to us as well.
And how do we quantify that? Because obviously, multinational corporation, you get numerous risks and challenges every single day. How do you sit there and quantify those risks?
Fundamentally, we look at, first off, impact to our customers. Our customers are the number one concern, and we take that extremely seriously. So what would be the impact to our customers? And ensuring that we can, in the worst situation, deal with that effectively, look after those customers, even in the wake of an incident. I think we'd all recognise that much as we would wish that it wouldn't happen, data breaches, security breaches are a fact of life. They happen to most organizations. It's how you deal with it that customers will respect, and customers will be glad of that you are able to deal with it and support them through something that might be quite difficult for them. We think about our services as well across the world. So we don't want our services to be interrupted. So how quickly can we get back on our feet and deliver service out to our customers? If you deal with your customers right, if you do good service and you deal with the incident correctly, then I was going to say potentially brand nearly takes care of itself. But impact on brand is another significant concern. We take all of this and then we decide where are we going to focus and deploy our different resources in order to protect our business, and what are we going to prepare for.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned almost it's not if an attack's going to happen, but when.
Listen, if you in an organisation are having the if conversation, get over it, have the when conversation, and really test yourself hard, stress yourself hard about how you're going to cope with that, and then what it means you want to do. Because in testing yourself, you'll find gaps, stuff that you're not comfortable with. Now you can start thinking about what are we going to do about those gaps. Now you're doing something that's related to what could happen, and you're accepting the fact that it really could happen. Not an if, but let's just say it's going to happen.
Yeah, I know we constantly test ourselves.
We do.
Threats and risks. How has that changed over the last 12, 18 months? Are you seeing the threat landscape changing?
Yeah, so again, just focusing there on the various actor groups. We have seen, as I said before, quite a rise in the nation states. Where I think every CISO that I talk to, they're seeing the same sort of thing, even though they're not related to government and they might not be providing what they think are critical national infrastructure services. But they're just seeing these people meddling about the place, and that's concerning. Nation states often will hide their activity by encouraging hacktivists to do some of their work for them. They'll use organised criminals as well to do the same thing. But we've seen quite a rise in serious organised crime. The criminals are recognising that they can acquire the cyber skills. They're there in the marketplace. And that provides a ready way for them to make quite a lot of money without potentially putting themselves at physical risk because they're the other side of the world.
Yeah, just congregating skills almost.
Absolutely, yeah. So they are grabbing those skills. As BT, because we have engineers out in the ground with lots of locations, both here and abroad, terrorism is something that we consider very closely as well. Not seen a great deal of terrorists getting involved in cyber activity, but I think that is something that maybe is on the horizon. But certainly the safe and well aspects of our people, wherever they are, is important for us when we're looking at things like terrorism.
Of course. And you mentioned you speak to CISOs quite regularly about this and have those conversations. Are we individual? Is everyone seeing the same sort of risks and
We definitely are. And in fact, we all look back to a time in late 2014, early 2015, when things changed, where we saw a sudden uptick in the complexity and the sophistication of the attacks and the way the actors were organising themselves. And that hasn't gone away. That's continued. They've become real innovators, and they drive innovation just as hard as we do, to serve our customers. They drive innovation to serve their wallets really hard, and we've seen a rise in that. We've also seen a rise in targeting individuals that work for organisations. People say people are the weakest link. I hate that phrase. They're just a really good target, okay, because they can be manipulated, they can be persuaded. It's not like trying to hack a system. You can hack a person, you can do various things to convince them that they know you and they should be doing what you ask, or releasing some information and so on. So making everybody aware in the organisation how important security is very important. But actually, one of the things that I've learned and recognised is that cyber security awareness is like a life skill. So back in my day, when I was growing up, your parents would send you on swimming lessons because everyone needs to know how to swim. Well, we all now need to know how to swim in the cyber world and how to protect ourselves and our personal data and be aware of the threats that are out there. And
Steve, you have to know BT inside out. You have to know the people there, the processes,
yes,
and the technology to get on with your role. How does that, I assume it benefits you, but how would you say that knowing your business really gives you that advantage in this world and in this?
Yeah, well, I'll move on to another graphic. So knowing your business is important, right? But the thing you need to step back is know your adversary and start being very curious about who it is paying attention to you. So going on from the previous slide to this slide, we rethought our approach, and we decided back around 2014, 2015, that we would focus on looking at ourselves in the way that the bad guys do, who are looking for the in, who are looking for the vulnerability to exploit, whether that is a technical vulnerability, whether that's to do with a physical location, or whether that's to do with individuals or people within your organization that could be targeted and manipulated. And then we basically looked at all of that and just said, okay, we need to then say, well, why? That's how they're going to come in, but why? Why are they going to do it? What is their business model? And that then gives me three things that I would consider. We need to make that expensive, dangerous and worthless. So I'll come back to that in a moment. The next thing we had to do, and I'll flip on to a later slide, is then to understand our business, understand where we operate. So we drew what we call our donut diagram, which you'll hopefully, guys, you'll see that on the screen. And in those concentric rings, it's a way of expressing how BT operates across the world, all the different layers of stuff we do, in a way that anyone can understand. Because each of those layers presents a potential attack surface, as we talk about it in security, something that could be looked at, pressed, stressed, or compromised. And so whereas the previous wisdom was focus on your crown jewels, so middle of that diagram is where we have our global networks and all the really important stuff. It's good to know where your crown jewels are and what's important, but recognize that everything else is also potentially compromisable and would have impact on customers, would have impact on service, could have impact on your brand and reputation. And then draw on that the sort of the concerns that you've got, like hours of a clock. And then doing so, then you can say, well, what do we want to do? What would be the threats in those areas? What could we do? And so what we're looking to do is to try and build security in by design. So we have put a security passport piece in place so that we can help our designers to build in security, not try to strap it on or bolt it on later, because A, it's expensive, and B, it's probably not going to be totally effective. Okay, so that gives us a problem. So building that kind of level of security and hygiene into everything we do makes it easier to manage in life. Means if you have an incident, it's easier to get around the grips of it, limit the impact, recover from it, and do all the right things around that. So you can sort of start to track back saying, right, I know what we do. Well, how does that all get out there? How does it get operated? And then how are we going to do the intervention to secure it? And how do we prepare if we get a security situation? So typically we have playbooks across all of our products and services, especially the really important ones, like BT Sport, for example.
Yeah, and something you mentioned earlier that I think is really key on that and really works into it is testing and continuous improvement.
Yes.
How often are you changing processes, seeing things change because of the way things have happened previously? Or
So we constantly drive to be a learning organisation. So both in terms of if we're assessing a threat, so we're looking at what's happening in the threat world. So in the way that we've organised ourselves to protect BT, we're absolutely built on understanding threat and then turning that threat into the risks to our organisation, not in terms of risk topics, but how those risks might play out for the different customer-facing units we have within the organisation. And then in that three-box model that you can see on screen, we have the guys that are dedicated to understanding that threat and risk and then turning that into policy and execution. On the right-hand side, we've got people who are dedicated to reaching out to all other parts of the business to help them understand that threat and risk and help them to do the right things. So security is not something that gets done to you. Security is not the ministry of no. Security is an enabler. We are a guide dog, we're a helper. We are helping the organisation to move forward boldly into their marketplaces, but knowing they are secure and they're looking after all of the right things. And in the middle, we have our engine functions, which is around the sharp end, around cyber and physical security operations, where I sit dealing with events and incidents and so on. We have, to your point, the testing element. So we have the penetration testing and red teaming. And red teaming is where we are really stressing our organisation in terms of human compromise, physical compromise, and cyber compromise, because the true nation-state level actors are doing that kind of stuff, serious organised crime, doing that sort of stuff. Yeah. So we've spent a lot of money training a crack team that really know how to do that. And then it's about going and looking for the threats, doing the threat hunting. And this is where we exploit our ringside seat. So as a global telecommunications provider, we see the internet. Yeah. We see, it's like the Matrix, right? We see the Matrix, busy, busy, busy. But we can look at the sorts of stuff that we're seeing moving around, coming towards us, going past us. And within that, there is badness. Over half the traffic on the internet is perfectly fine. But within that other sort of 50%, there is malicious stuff. So we work very carefully to look at that. And so, for example, within the UK, working with the National Cybersecurity Centre, we've identified over 300,000 malicious domains since Christmas. But we've blocked them as well. So we are making the UK a safer place for everyone to be in terms of the internet, and we're encouraging the rest of industry to take that kind of approach as well.
So you've pretty much underlined BT's strategy there, which was going to be my next question. But really, you mentioned a three-pronged approach earlier as well.
Yeah,
in terms of
I'll come back to that because it's an important one, because again, it's keeping your focus on your adversaries. I think often, because a lot of us are technologists, right? Okay, you're probably tuned in here, probably a lot of you are technologists as well, is we enjoy the technical challenge of combating the attack. You know, what was it? Was it cross-site scripting? Was it this? Was it that? And we could almost get a letterbox approach where we're just dealing with each of the technical challenges that a cyber attack gives us without stepping back and saying, well, why? Why are we being attacked? What are they doing here? So my mantra, back to it, expensive. What do I mean by expensive? Well, I want to put in the multi-layered defences in terms of protection and detection and our ability to recover. That means somebody wanting to do an attack against us will have to put in a lot of investment in terms of resource and technology in order to be successful. So I want it like a business case for them to say attacking BT is going to cost a lot, hopefully, right? Then I want to make it dangerous. What I mean by that is we want to be able to do as much as we can to gather as much data about what's going on so that we can share it with other agencies so they can make life dangerous for those individuals, for those gangs and so on. So essentially they can use that information to go after them. Now we can't attack them back, but there are other agencies who have that ability, and we want to share that information with them. And we want to start to learn about who these groups are and what their tactics, what their tools, what their processes might look like. Then finally, if they are successful, how do we make their success worthless as quickly as possible? So an example for that would be we have BT IDs, which is typically people's email address because they get their email services from BT. And you know, when you go off and you enroll in a new site, they typically say, oh, make your username your mail address. That'll be convenient because it's unique to you. Great. Then they'll say, choose a password. How often do you say, I just typed in the password that's related to that? Now you've given away a credential. So if that site gets compromised or something happens there, suddenly there's a credential that will get tried across everywhere. So we watch very carefully to see attempts coming back onto our interfaces to utilize those credentials, and we can spot when it doesn't look right. And depending on, I'm not going to go into detail, but depending upon what we see, we will then take the appropriate actions with that credential and with the customer to advise them and help them with regards to their own security, but ensuring that nothing bad has happened to them in terms of our services.
So what case?
Which makes it worthless, right? Yeah, to your point, because the
yeah.
credential has changed and the customer has been alerted. And they'll change. So suddenly, stuff that they were able to sell on doesn't work anymore. So if they're using that BT ID to access BT Sport for free on a mobile app, the credential doesn't work within an hour. Within an hour of us being aware of it. Yeah. And we hunt very hard for this stuff.
And is that one of the key ways we start to do things in terms of just keeping our customer informed and getting things changed for them quickly? Yeah.
We're looking to just raise the cyber awareness, and we're doing more and more around that. It's like learning to swim. Going back to my previous point, Louis, we all need to know how to swim in the cyber world. It's vitally important. If we take the time out to learn about it, share it with the people we really care about, we can all be better prepared. We're going to do our bit as far as BT is concerned. We're engaging with the rest of industry to share actionable intelligence, to lift our game. The bad guys want us to not share intelligence, to be embarrassed about security and compromise and attacks. Best thing for us to do is to share it, so collectively we can make this a much harder place for the actors to be successful.
Of course. And I want to jump on something you said around us reacting within an hour. I think that's really key. How important is it for us to react quickly and have those playbooks in place so that our response and our instant response is quick, but also successful, really? We want it to be ready and to go.
It's vitally important. But the thing about these playbooks is it's not just about the technology and looking after the technology and the data end of things. Of course, you need to understand what those impacts have been. But we need to be very clear on how we're going to communicate. Who do we need to tell? What do we need to tell them? How do we keep them informed? Who do we need to tell in terms of regulators, if it's something to do with data privacy, for example, and it's very stringent legislation, of course, with the EU GDPR, which, of course, we're all aware of, guys, tuned in. But also, the media will judge us. From the moment something gets public, they will judge us on how well we are dealing with it. And in the aftermath, any regulators that are doing an assessment in terms of whether they want to fine us or whatever, will look at how we dealt with it. And they will determine whether or not we, one, do we have the right protections in place, but given we did have a breach, how well did we deal with it? Did we deal with it effectively? And that will determine, their action coming from that. That will also determine our customers' attitude towards us. Yep. That will also determine media's attitude towards us. That could affect our share price. It's our brand and our reputation. And I remember seeing a slogan one time on a marketing company which stuck with me. I saw it years ago. And they said that the best brands are forgiven. So I think I think we're all becoming aware that cyber incidents are on the rise, and they will happen. And what we're looking for is organisations that have recognised that have prepared for it, and deal with it well.
So you mentioned again the monetary side of it. BT's key. The two key things really to BT is obviously its brand and image, but we do have to look sometimes, as you say, at the crown jewels. I know we look at a different strategy in protecting them.
Yeah.
Could you give us a little bit of an outline into how BT does that as well?
Yeah, sure. So just as I come off this slide, recognise that these guys innovate all the time, like I said earlier, really, right?
Yeah.
But they don't have the problems that we all have, right? Which is business cases and financial year cycles and quarterly financial cycles and reporting and all that kind of stuff. They just innovate. So in my investment programme that I talked about, and I'll bring up on screen again, is the Citadel programme. I've ensured we've set this up so it actually continuously invests. So anybody working in the 80, 90 or so projects that make up this programme, they have no idea that we're crossing a financial year boundary. Our efforts are continuous. And that's something I recognise at the very start. And it's something that I've put into play, which helps us at least to be armed to fight the battle in terms of the evolving threat. So you can see on screen there the different areas that we've made investment in, and you sort of see over the last 3 years, not showing what we're doing currently this year, but you can see previously where investment focus has happened, things being brought into scope. And you can see how it's grown out, from ensuring that we had the core, the crown jewels, well protected. So I'm still saying, don't ignore your crown jewels, but don't let that be your destination. Okay, think about the other layers, the other aspects of your operation. So compartmentalization, what's that? Well, that is actually almost reversing some of the flattening of infrastructure so that you can put segments into it using sort of next generation firewall techniques to create independence. So an attack on one place cannot necessarily spread in terms of impact or provide ease of lateral movement for a persistent actor. That you can actually define secure domains where you can put applications together that should work together. Because if you do that sort of stuff, then you know what's normal in that domain. And guess what? When you know what's normal, you can investigate when something abnormal happens and get on the front foot. So that's really, really vital. DDoS, massive for us because of our broadcast, TV, sport, premium sport especially. And so ensuring that we have our DDoS protection positioned correctly for the volumetric attacks, so we have it right at the edge, so we don't gum up our pipework, but also ensuring we've got the right techniques in play for each of our internet-facing applications for the application layer-based attacks, which are the low, slow, insidious types of denial of service. Next piece we have around that is scanning and monitoring. And this is vitally important. WannaCry would be a massive example of this. And that is ensuring that you have adequate scanning across all of your assets in terms of vulnerability, in terms of correct configuration, in terms of there being deployment of the right security tooling like antivirus and so on, that you've got the right log monitoring and so on, right logs being gathered in and so on. Which is important as you look to the right-hand side of the diagram to ensure then coupled to that, you have an adequate patch and vulnerability management program. So when WannaCry broke, we'd assessed the vulnerability that had come out from Microsoft. we had identified a prioritised set of patching that needed to happen across the estate, looking at everything that was facing the internet as being our first priority, and then working our way in. So when WannaCry actually broke on the internet, and it wasn't just patching, it was also taking out the availability of that port facing the internet, we had not one single infection or detonation of WannaCry across our global estate.
Wow.
Not one. Not one. And that was because we had the right tooling, but we also had the right process across our technology estate with our ASGs, our application support people, ensuring that they had done the patching, that they had done the reconfigurations. And so when WannaCry broke, we still had more work to do internally. So we had our playbooks ready for what we would do if we found a detonation within the estate and how we would contain it. But we, thank goodness we didn't, but we were prepared.
Yeah, of course.
Okay? And we continued to drive as a priority to ensure that we wouldn't be affected, and we weren't. So that's where playbooks come into play. So I talked about the scanning and monitoring tools. CyberCloud is our ringside seat. This is where we are curious and looking at what's happening out there as a global carrier, looking at the metadata around the sorts of traffic, what it is, where it's going from, where it's going to. We're not snooping into the traffic, just let everyone understand that. It's about what it is, and it's only for the purposes of cybersecurity and protection of BT as a business and our customers. That's a lot of data, right? And that's why we have a big data solution, which is our cybersecurity platform, which allows us then to hunt for the needles in that massive haystack. So we are processing in excess of 600,000 events per second of our CyberCloud, as well as everything else that we bring in to enrich that information. That allows us to be a hunter-gatherer organisation, to go threat hunting. Links with our HoneyNet environment, where we are looking at the badness that's happening. We're doing botnet research, we're looking at malware, we're reverse engineering it. We are looking at how actors are trying to infect vulnerable servers and applications. So we have good HoneyNet architecture out there. We bring all of that back then to help us to move from just not reactive, but to proactive, and dare I say it, moving towards predictive security. And that's really where our game is focused, is to get ourselves so that we can move off beyond proactive into predicting where the threats are going to unfold for us. That's all the cyber stuff.
Yep.
Never forget to protect your locations. So physical security, as you can see, plays a big part there. And the final bit that you see at the very end there is the global discovery and the red teaming. This is all about us using the same tools, procedures, techniques the bad guys use to look for the vulnerabilities across our estate, so we can get after them proactively and shut them down.
And I think, just looking at it from my side as well, seeing it's a complete mix of people, processes and technology on your roadmap, and each of them as important as each other.
Yeah, it's not just investing in vendor equipment, and there are thousands of security vendors out there. The explosion over the last 10 years in terms of security vendors has been immense, many of whom will often talk about theirs being the silver bullet, the most important aspect. They're all important. Choosing the right mix is really important. That's why we have a cyber assessment lab. So we are constantly scouting for the new technologies, and we're starting to bring them in like a radar diagram, coming in closer to us on the different types and topics and domains of security. And then we are doing the evaluation to see, how well do they work? Do they do what they say in the tin? In what domains would they be most useful? Because what's useful for us in protecting BT might not be useful for one of our customers because of peculiarities that they have. But we want to be expert in the advice that we give. And so we utilise a lot of time and resource so that when we go and talk to a customer, it's not because we've done some great deal necessarily, then it's because we've properly kicked the tires on something and we know it's the right solution for the customer.
And what sort of, I'm conscious we can't go into huge amounts of details on it, but what sorts of key themes are we seeing in that cyber assessment lab at the moment that's coming through to you then as well?
Well, I think what we're seeing is we're seeing a rise in persistence.
Of course.
So we're seeing more and more evidence of sophisticated actors doing a lot of research and finding ways in which they can get footholds and very slowly and carefully live off the land whilst they work their way around and identify what they're interested in. And so the ability to think about how would you both segment your estate, but how you would set up adequate trip wiring and so on in order to find that. But also ensure that you are working and have relationships with other agencies and people that have other vantage points that can help you to detect that. So we're seeing a lot of sophistication around that. We're seeing the volumetric growth in terms of denial of service. So we saw massive leaps last year, up to about 1.7 terabytes, far in excess of anyone's raw cleaning capability, it has to be said. So again, how do you combat a large attack like that? It's a multi-layered approach we take with that. We're seeing an evolution in terms of malware. I think we're seeing ransomware that's going to become, rather than individually crypt and then decrypt, it might just be destructive, and they actually will pose a threat, say with a kill button, to say, you know, if you don't pay within a certain amount, we're going to detonate and you're going to lose stuff forever. We think that could be a feature that may happen. And we're seeing a lot of code sharing happening as well amongst the bad guys. They tend to modify each other's code, so you get lots of branches of different types of malware. The last piece about malware is signature-based detection is starting not to work at all.
Of course. Yeah.
So they are evading those sorts of things. They're innovators, right? So they're building a product. So the product's got to be successful. So it's got to deal with the challenges of the marketplace. The challenges of the marketplace are signature-based detection. So what we saw with some malware that we've seen coming towards us is the malware itself changed every hour. So the signature-based signature would change every hour. And in fact, its C2, its command and control infrastructure, changed 9 or 10 times a day.
Wow.
So we had to put some clever stuff in play that allowed us to get ahead of what was happening there, which we did. And this is where our clever people, like not one silver bullet, multiple things that we're utilising across our arsenal that helped us get on top of that type of threat.
And you mentioned in there the bad guys sharing intelligence and sharing tactics.
Yeah.
Are we doing it? Are we doing enough of it? Are we sharing intelligence with other agencies, with other businesses?
Yeah.
You spoke about talking to CISOs earlier. How key is that to you in your role?
Absolutely vital. It's vital that we as a community come together, please, and talk about the sorts of compromises and threats. We work very heavily with National Cybersecurity Centre here in the UK, but also colleagues across the pond in the US and in Europe, and law enforcement agencies, Interpol, Europol, and so on. But what we are looking to do is share actionable intelligence, so intelligence that you can actually do something with. And we don't believe that that should be necessarily something that has to be paid for. It's something that we should as a community come together to do. So if you read the NCSC's annual report that came out a few months ago, and they talk about active cyber defence, you'll see that we're very much in the vanguard of that. We have our malware information sharing platform that we've worked with NCSC to put out there. People are joining that, so we have quite a few within the UK around the telco space and ISP space that have joined it. We've got similar bodies across in the US that have joined it, and in Canada, and it is where we are sharing really good intelligence on the indicators of malware and how to recognise it, and therefore reflect that back to your estate, what you can do with it, enrich it, maybe add some more information to it, share it back. We think it's absolutely vital. It's where we need to be. Strengthen defence, but also strengthen the ability to curate and share good intelligence.
And I think the sharing side is also so key for you. I mean, I know you share lots with customers, but internally as well, we share what we see with the customers we're working with. Yeah. What we're seeing inside BT, and then what we're doing with government, with critical national infrastructure as well. Yeah. Do you see that a lot in terms of the tactics following each other or sharing intelligence there as well? Yeah,
we do. So we will always take an interest in what's happening in our neighbourhood. And that's part of so we can get it off the intelligence sharing. But we've seen recent attacks, and the most recent one, which everyone will be thinking of, is the one that was to do with the card skimming. That has affected one of our very treasured brands actually here in the UK, and it's a terrible thing to happen to them. The thing about that though is, if you as the supplying organisation, you wouldn't have seen necessarily anything wrong with what's happening on your website, right? The transactions are all going through, everything looks great. The skimming was happening on the client side because of modified script. So the attack came a different way, which was modifying that script in order to do that. So it's a different set of countermeasures you'd need to have in place around that. But it just shows the ingenuity of those actors to figure out what they wanted to do, and then how did they get that deployed and operating for the number of weeks that it was there for. That's the scary stuff, is that level of research to the target, thinking about what they want to do, working out a particular script that is tailored for that organization. You know, it's not like the sort of generalist type attacks that we've seen before. This is absolute targeting, and that's where it's shifting towards. Very clever people recognizing how much money can be made. 380,000 card details were taken. Wow. Don't yet know what the financial impacts of that were, but it just shows that, you know, that's where we've got to shift our game towards.
Yeah. So how important is being proactive and almost predictive then?
Massively important. What I say to our people is be curious. We want our people to be curious, to be looking and hunting. But like I say, it's shifting towards the behavioural stuff, things that just are different from the normal pattern of life. Whether you're looking at network traffic, whether you're looking at the behaviour of your infrastructure, whether you're looking at a web server, whether you're looking at transactions that are happening across that, anything that shifts from a normal pattern of life, be curious.
So Steve, the £1 million question has come. How does BT keep up with that ever-changing threat landscape, and what's the real key parts for you in that?
Key parts for us is our people. And through my investment programme that I talked about before, we have ensured that we have underpinned and made investment in the key things that we think will enable our people to be able to keep pace. So our focus has been towards data and being able to curate the large amounts of data and enrich it so that we have it in terms of investigating something that doesn't look right, but we can also use it to do the threat exploration. So we may not have an impact of something, but there's something starting to develop, the weak signals, and starting to try and get ahead of what that might be. Take appropriate action for ourselves, but you know what the last bit is: share actionable intelligence, share information with other agencies, and fundamentally for us, starting to build a picture that we understand the different adversaries that are paying us attention. Why they're doing it, what's their business model, how do I make it expensive, how do I make it dangerous, how do I make it worthless.
Brilliant. And how final point really, from our side, in terms of actually when you are hearing things shared, everyone, I think in the security world, thinks their problems are, I don't want to tell anyone because it's an individual problem. How common are the problems that we're seeing? Is it around the table everyone's saying the same sort of things?
Very, very similar. Yeah, I would say, you know, when I talk with other CISOs and so on, I share the Protect BT story in some detail because we're in a Chatham House rules and we can talk openly as CISOs. We do recognise the same sorts of threats because all organisations have customers. Well, you can only have customers if they're paying you for what they're giving with you. Somewhere money plays a part. You have to hold various types of detail around those customers and so on. So we all are like, you know, targets for the same sorts of reasons. Our infrastructure might be slightly different. We could be in different positions with regards to in-house, with regards to using cloud services, to have something in between. Our suppliers and who we use in our supply chain, all of those things create different challenges about how do you create the security posture you want based on having assessed the impact and the risk and the threat. But that's where actually, I know, plug for BT, but this is where, you know, because we've got Protect BT and our commercial piece together, we can be very effective in helping organisations plot their way through all of that.
Brilliant. Steve, that's the end of my questions so far. So I'm going to throw it over to some of the live questions we've got coming through. I think the first one that's come through is, what do you see as future challenges, threats or trends in the marketplace? Okay,
so I think it goes back to the business model is still the same. It's going to be the monetization aspect, but it's going to be how they do it. So they're recognising that most organisations are making bigger investments in terms of securing themselves from a cyber perspective. So I think we're going to see a shift towards how you can do the same, get the same result, but can you do it on the client side? And I think, you know, what's happened most recently is a very good example of that, where if you're not looking in the right direction as an organisation, you wouldn't notice that your customers are being affected by a scammer. And so that's vitally important. The other piece, I think, is there will be increasing focus on people because they're already inside your organisation. They're your people. So if they can be compromised or persuaded to do the wrong thing or not follow what you've said is the way that you need to engage with a customer, that a very clever person just persuades them on the phone to give something away that they shouldn't do, or they haven't gone through the validation checks. You know, this is what they're going to try and do, because as hard as we make cyber then they're going to move to another target. And I think the next target is going to be our people.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I'm just looking at the next. Oh, that's a proper security question that's come in. What are the consequences of getting it all wrong, Steve?
The consequences of getting it all wrong, I think we talked about the impact to your customers, right? And that's fundamentally looking after your customers. The impact to your ability for the services, if they actually take down the service, or it takes you a while to clean up a service so you can get it back on stream. Customers might walk away, go somewhere else. They might not come back. You've got your brand and reputation aspect. I think the last thing that we're now starting to see is the threat of class action. So we're now seeing the lawyers starting to look at the impact on customers and pulling them together and then launching a class action against the organisation. So if it wasn't enough for all the other impacts and the media and the brand and reputation and potential share price affecting and the actions of regulators, we've now got the threat of class action. Yeah,
absolutely. Next question that's come in, Steve. How important is visibility to you as a CISO and being able to see the devices, what the people are doing in your business?
It's vitally important. But for me, it's important that the people that actually look after those devices share the same visibility and also are bought in and understand the security threats and the importance and the strength that it gives your business to be looking after those devices correctly.
Yeah.
I call it the anthill effect. So you look at an anthill and they're all busy running around, but what they do as an organisation is great. It's amazing, isn't it? Because an individual ant isn't that smart on their own, but together they're brilliant. And that's what I really am focusing on, is that visibility, but ensuring that's not just a visibility that I have in some ivory tower here in a security operations centre. It's a visibility that I can make relevant to those out in the organisation that fundamentally look after this stuff and keep it secure and ensure that they know what they need to be getting after by when.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And the final question we've got that's come in, Steve, is, Steve, what can we learn from the recent security breaches, both as BT and for the customers listening?
So I think what we have learnt is there's a shift now towards hiding a scam by how can you make it execute on the client side, which means that it's not under your purview because it's not part of what you monitor. And as far as the transactions going in and out of your interfaces, they all look fine. So I think from the recent security breaches, you see that kind of shift towards trying to exploit the client. So then you're saying, well, how does that happen? And therefore, how do I protect that? So you start to look at, right, how do I keep the code base secure? On my website, I've got my own stuff, but I've got other stuff that comes in from other sites that is utilised as well. So a few months ago, we had, I think it was the Talk Aloud stuff that helps you with visual impairment. And that got compromised and was only doing Bitcoin mining, so it wasn't, nasty for anybody. But fundamentally, it was doing something it shouldn't be doing. So how do you then ensure that your supply chain of those other things that also have presence on your websites and so on is also secure? And if you're going to try and secure that, then how do you manage change and how do you just put that diligence, put that hygiene around it? Yeah. And I think that's what we've got to start, really start thinking about, is recognising and not seeing anything that happens in terms of a cybersecurity incident as assuming it's a one-off.
Yeah, absolutely.
If it's happened once, it's going to happen again, but they'll probably modify it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think that really goes along with the key messages I've got from today, and I hope everyone else has, in terms of sharing intelligence, being proactive, and actually having visibility and looking at your estate and saying, okay, we need to prepare for when an attack's going to happen and not if. Yeah. Is there any more summaries that you wanted to leave everyone with today, Steve?
No, I would just say don't put any of this off. Do ensure that you're getting adequate airtime with your board and with your senior leaders. Help them to understand that security is actually going to be an enabler for you. It will be a differentiator. Yeah. Customers will become more interested and curious about how secure you are. I think the interesting thing that I've seen, probably we've all seen most recently, is the rise of the independent security assessment type firms. So the likes of BitSight, for an example. Of course, there are others available on the marketplace, right? But BitSight is a good example. So you can go to BitSight and you can look up a company and you'll see a score coming back. So the genie is out of the bottle. So people are now curious about somebody else's view of how secure you are. And that might influence choices. It might influence whether you get invited to tender or whether you make it through the first round. It might affect whether customers decide to come to you for services. So we definitely see security as a real differentiator for us.
Yep, absolutely.
As part of our brand. Not just the services that we supply directly that are security related to customers, which of course we do, but also the security that we build in to our products and services, right the way from our consumer-based broadband to our mobile devices and everything else.
Yeah.
We see it as an important piece of what we provide, in addition to fundamentally giving you your broadband.
Yeah, and it's key for everyone to remember that everything that you're doing, Steve, for protecting BT is what goes out to our customers and really changes how we service them and how we offer products to them.
Absolutely, absolutely right. And we know the next evolution is the explosion of the Internet of Things. What is that going to mean? How do we protect people in their homes when they're connecting multiple devices and they're not necessarily all doing what they're supposed to be doing? It's hard for somebody that's just bought stuff to know what they could do. So how can we help around that? But then the more and more that we're seeing in terms of artificial intelligence and the rise of all of that is we got to think about, for all the good things that can achieve, if it was subverted, if it was compromised, what could be the impact? What could be the outcomes of that? Because we're starting to put trust in technology that's been brought to market pretty fast because of the opportunity. Is it secure? Could it be compromised? Is there something within its, right down to its chipset, that would mean that we couldn't trust it anymore? And what would that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't look like we've had any more questions come in so far. So, Steve, I just want to say thank you very much for your time today. I think it's been really informative. I've learned a lot today, and I hope everyone listening in has as well.
I hope so too.
Yeah, so I hope that showed you how we're trying to make security integral to our business. And if you've got any questions, please get in touch. We'll show you how the portfolio encompasses everything that Steve's done and all the key stuff that he's doing for BT to help with these solutions for you. Thank you very much for your time today.